Welcome back, guys, to episode 12 of scrubbedin podcast. So today's episode we're going to be discussing finally how our first day, first week and even our first month was as brand new junior doctors working in the UK. We've talked about med school, but now it's time to get to the meat of it. We're going to be talking our first few days as a junior doctor. So as you may know, there is this, we all start on a Wednesday and it's called Black Wednesday, which is the first week of August. And the reason why they call it Black Wednesday is, tell them.
So essentially, they've shown statistics, I think, which show that the death rate goes up. Because on that day, obviously, you've got all the brand new, fresh
junior
doctors on the wards looking after everyone. So apparently, and I think, I think it's actually real statistics.
It does. Every day, so if you ever read on newspapers, Black Wednesday, death rates goes up. I don't know if it's actually...
It just destroys our morale before starting.
Yeah, so you're scared. Funnily enough, before we go into it, one or two of the consultants in my last job, so I'm on obstetrics and gynecology, so we call it Obs and Gynae. Two of the consultants took off the first day because it was the day juniors start on the ward.
Did you want to be around?
They didn't want to be around. They didn't want to take any risks and liabilities. In a future episode, we'll talk about specialties, but we'll keep things general now. So straight to your point.
Yeah.
How was your first day as a doctor? I don't think the viewers know, where were you working? What city? Like, start with that first so we get a good idea.
I started in London, Barts Trust, Royal London. So, bro, I was proud because Royal London is where I was born.
Yeah.
It's like me. So, even my mum and everyone, it's like a kid where he was born,
full circle,
returning to the same place where he was born as a doctor.
Like Simba, like.
That was like a Simba type sort of movie. And so I was returning to my own hospital in the local area. So that's home. That's my home. I live down the road from there. So I remember obviously that excitement of I'm a doctor. So with the whole excitement, you get up really early, get a good breakfast in, and then you're off to work. And I remember you come onto the ward and so it was a bit complicated. So with my job, right, I started on vascular surgery, right? Now vascular surgery, right, the patients that are in that sort of pool that require any sort of vascular surgery, they're typically very, very, very ill. They'll have almost every other condition: diabetes, kidney disease, advanced kidney disease, would have lots of heart attacks, gangrenous toes that need to be cut off and things. I knew that nationally that was the same, so I didn't actually apply for vascular surgery. Wow. I got my first choice in terms of jobs on paper, which was I was supposed to be in colorectal surgery.
Yeah.
And then they just drafted me away, and I remember having a little bit of a fiasco, going and sitting down and saying, why have I been moved? I don't accept. And I remember they just brought out the T's and C's, which basically said your job is subject to change wherever we see fit and wherever there's a demand. Yeah. So anyways, shoved into vascular, and I knew I was going to be in for a hell of a ride now. Very sick patients, okay? I wanted to ease myself in. That wasn't going to happen.
There is no easing in medicine.
So I remember I walked onto the wards, surgery being surgery, and I knew this was the case. I just remember someone saying, doctor, doctor, doctor. I've walked by, because it's the first time someone has said, I'm thinking medical student, so people would call me Amz or Ahmed or whatever. And so I've just walked straight by, and they're like, I remember the nurse saying, doctor, can you not hear me? Are you deaf or something? Hello. I just looked back, like, quick, this patient. What do you mean quick, this patient? No, wait. Let me go call the SHO. Yeah. SHO is 1 year senior than me. Anyways, that was the first moment, right? And it was already panic. Anyway, the patient was okay. The SHO came over. He was all okay. Anyways, I go into the room and I did the whole introductions. Hi, my name's Ahmed. And everyone just looked at me like, oh, you're the fresh-faced medical student.
They know, innit?
Okay, they know straight away. Like, this guy, we're going to trust him with all of our patients. And so, yeah, that was it. So that was my first day. I was on the wards and I was with the SHO and we had to do the ward round. And it was just like, what? Like, what do you mean do the ward round? And I was like, what do I do? what do I do? anyways, so yeah, we did the ward round. So on the ward round, essentially I got the laptop, trolley with the computer, logged in, and I'd be documenting. And we did the ward round for like 50 patients that day, and I was tired, man, because other people I remember had like 15 patients, some had 20 at tops, and we had like 50 patients, 2 different wards sometimes, and so many outliers. I was finished that day.
Bro.
I was finished.
Did you notice, the first few weeks as a doctor, you come home and you start napping. Like, I never used to nap in med school, but because you're actually working and because you're really working, like genuinely working and running around, you feel tired, and you come home and you're like, "Bro, why am I so tired? I've never been this tired." And the one thing I've learned, the first few weeks or in general, is going to sleep at 10 o'clock is not bad. It's a very good idea. Before, 10 o'clock, I'll be on my phone, I'll be out, I'll be doing whatever. I can be going to sleep at 2 a.m. up. 10 o'clock is like, I need to sleep, man. Like, I don't want to do. Like, I'm tired. I
remember you'd WhatsApp, be like, "Alright guys, I'm off to bed now."
Yeah,
it'd be like 9:30, like, Abdul's a changed man.
Yeah, man, it was crazy.
But then sleep is important, man. Like you start napping. If you were tired and you were on wards, you'd be like, "What's going on?" You'd be just dazed for the whole day, man. It's just
it's like you don't realize how tiring working is. My first day, I'm trying to think. So it's different to you. So obviously, I got Coventry. At the time, I was like, how did I end up in Coventry? The reason why I ended up in Coventry, guys, is because I didn't do really well with my SJT. So
you didn't log your publication properly.
Oh my days!
So you missed
I missed a point because I missed out one of the number for my publication, which 1 point is crazy. Like people miss out on places due to like 0.4 of a point. So I missed out that. Secondly, I didn't do that great in my SJT. So luckily, my EPM ranking was high enough to kind of get to Coventry and get the jobs I wanted, but it meant I moved out of London. So when I did my applications, I wanted to either be in London, and if I wasn't in London, I wanted to go somewhere in the Midlands, like Coventry, Birmingham, where I knew people, and it was kind of familiar terrain for me. So luckily, I got my second choice in terms of deaneries, but it was in Coventry, which was a massive hit. When I found out the first day, you know, when you open your laptop and you're like, "Yo, I got Coventry." It's South Midlands or South West Midlands. So I thought you meant South London. So I was like, "Yeah, cool." I called Amz, and he's like, "Nah, check it again. You're in Midlands." I was like, "Nah, bro." So I closed my laptop and I went to sleep. This is what I do. If it's a big problem,
he sleeps it off.
I close my laptop and then I go to sleep. And then the next day I was like, I woke up, I saw it, and I was like, I didn't acknowledge it for a week or two, and then I realized, crap, do you know what? I'm actually have to go Coventry. It's like, so long story short, I did go Coventry. You have to go Coventry. That's the only difficulty in this country is you don't have much of a say where you go. You can have a choice and pick, but at the end of the day, if you've been given somewhere, you have to go and do it.
There,
in the beginning, it was a bit difficult to adjust. Bear in mind, I grew up and was born in central London. I went to med school in London, and I'd say I was probably a bit homesick because I'm so used to having people around me. And then I used to live in the hospital accommodation, which was very small, and I was there for 2 weeks, and it just stressed me out. And I remember, I don't know if people followed me at that time, I was on Google and I was like, alternative careers to medicine. I was like, nah.
He was planning his exit.
I was planning my exit day one because I thought, do you know what? I'm out here in Coventry. I'm away from my friends and family. I'm in this really small room. There's no one here. Luckily, I ended up staying with 2 other flatmates that went to med school with me, and you know, so that was fine. But it's just in the moment you're like, you know, what did I get myself into? So it's like a bittersweet moment for me, whereas for you it was probably close to home. Whereas for me, I had this added layer. Oh, do you know what? I really miss home. And for me, it was like, I'm gonna move out. I'm gonna be independent. But when you're there and you're doing it, it's very different. And I think that was a bit difficult for me. So my first day, I think the first day is okay. Like they know you're fresh, they know you're there, so there's an element of leniency. Generally, London v non-London hospitals. So hospital outside of London depends on which you are. So at that time I was at DGH, so District General Hospital. So it's more to do with the towns and stuff. It wasn't that busy. It was fairly busy, but not to the extent the major hospitals in Coventry is or the major hospitals in London is. So that week was so I was doing general surgery, more so upper GI, so like gallbladder, stomach, and all of that stuff. My consultant was on post-take. So for all the non-medics, it's essentially when every single new patient that comes in through A&E that has a surgical issue is under my care or under my consultant's care, and it kind of feeds up to me.
Abdul's care.
So post-take, so for us in our hospital is 1 week of every single admission through A&E's ours. Can you imagine? So I walked into a patient list of 30 people. Bear in mind, I've never done the job, and my SHO took a week off, right? So it's just me, my reg, and the consultant. So a junior doctor, a middle grade doctor, and a senior consultant.
They all do that, don't they? On my first week, all of the regs went on a holiday. I was like,
I don't know. I think they know, and they want us to suffer.
To support us, man.
It's like the guy said. It's like we were baptized in fire that week.
Yeah, that's what it is.
I had on my first day, one of the medics. I was with one of the F1s. She was crying, and I had to console her because it just became overwhelming. Because ward runs, when you have loads of patients, super busy, super fast, you're rushing to get a list of all the jobs that need to be done for each and every patient. So even if it's one job per patient, and I had 30 patients, that's 30 pieces of things that need to be done within 8 hours, or that 9 to 5 or 4 to...
you're doing it whether you have to stay back.
Yeah, so,
and you don't get paid overtime.
Yeah, so regardless, whatever. And that week, not even a week or two, those 2-3 weeks was a blur for me. It was a rush because you're learning things, and this bleep, you get really excited, you got a bleep, and then it doesn't stop ringing, and then you realize this piece of machine, which is this big, like a portable charger, dictates your life, and it's non-stop. In essence, a bleep is a little device. When nurses need you, or whenever anyone needs you, they bleep you, and then you answer it, and most often it means you have to go do something. But my first day, or let's say my first 3 days, because we started on Wednesday, Thursday, Friday was the end of the post-take week. It was crazy. It felt like when we're busy, and it doesn't feel like I worked one day. It's like a blur, man. And
it just flashes by as a blur. You know what? I was just thinking, right? When you're never taught in med school how to document, how to do all of that, and you're never taught how to then, when the consultant goes, get me a scan, and then you call up and the radiologist goes, nah, we're not doing the scan, and you're just still like, but my boss said, my boss said we need the scan.
And these are things you hear, but I remember once to the radiology. So in radiology, NHS, as you all know, it's like conserving resources right now. And if you need a scan, you get a scan. But if you're 50-50, you don't know if you need a scan or not, or if you have an inkling, it's a certain diagnosis and you need a scan. So you have to go to radiology, and it's like pitching. If you're like, imagine your business and you're pitching to get investment. So you're literally pitching to a radiologist. So he's a doctor, he or she, who authorizes someone to have a CT scan or MRI scan, and you always prepare a pitch. So an example would be, this is actually quite nice because I don't think we ever talked about cases. So it would be like, I've got a 68-year-old lady who's post-op 3 days. She had a cholecystectomy, so she had a gallbladder removal. She's got this sudden onset difficulty in breathing and sharp chest pain. I'm worried it's a clot in the lung. So there's different things you can do to make your case stand if it is what we call a pulmonary embolism. So I'm preparing, I want to get a scan to see if there is a clot in the lungs, right? It's called a CTPA. So imagine I'm a radiologist, I'll say, I've got a 68-year-old lady, post-op, she's had a cholecystectomy, sudden onset shortness of breath, I think it's a clot in the lungs, can I book a test? You know what he said to me? He said, go back out. In my head, I'm thinking I've got a lady in a PE who's going to deteriorate. He goes, go back out, come back in again, and tell me your name. And once you tell me your name, tell me your rank.
It's because we're panicking, like, oh my god, someone's going to die. I need to get this.
Tell me your rank, and then tell me. And then after that, if I like it, I'll let you know. So all of a sudden, your brain goes meltdown. You're like, what? I've prepared this. I've been practicing it from the corridor to here. And radiologist, I don't know whether, but they're always tucked up in some corner of the hospital. So now it's like, good afternoon, my name is Dr. Rahyead, I'm one of the F1s. I need to book a scan. And then it just completely threw me. And typically for the medics, you know, like radiologists are infamous for refusing scans. Sometimes when you do book a scan, you feel proud of yourself and you give yourself a pat on the back. But I think for us in general, it's the little jobs that make, like, you know, for like a patient, it's always, you know, do blood tests, book investigation, scans, refer to a different specialty for advice or discharge them. As a doctor in this country, or as a junior doctor, your job is basically manage a patient from once they come in, get them well enough to be discharged home, and then you just do the same cycle again and you do everything between. But I found that I was staying back late a lot of the time.
A lot of the times, I came home.
Like, what would happen? So out of your,
I mean,
not now. So like in the first few weeks, how long would you say you spent back, or what was the longest length of time you stayed back?
I think I stayed back nearly 3 hours every day for possibly 2 weeks. I was slow, man, as well. I was slow. It's just because the systems are slow. You're spending an extra 5 minutes where the pods are, where the blood needles are, and all of those things. Everything takes that little bit longer when you're new there. I also remember I was also down because vascular patients have terrible veins to take blood from. Terrible veins, so it's always challenging. But coming on...
vascular, what does vascular mean? Because I know we've got loads of non-medics. And
vascular as in... So essentially, our specialty dealt with surgery on arteries and veins of the body that would either be blocked off or clotted or whatever. For example, if they had a clotted artery within the leg and they had gangrenous toes, so we'd amputate the toes. So based on that, or we'd have people who... were drug users and they'd come in with a big huge infected mass in their hand. But anyways, the common feature across that population of patients would be they've got very bad veins, very difficult to bleed. And my confidence was so low because I couldn't really successfully bleed everyone, and it really made me feel like I was really crap at this basic skill,
which is like the day-to-day bread and butter of a junior doctor, taking bloods and putting a cannula in.
I had some good support. I had a really good SHO. Bono, if you're watching, thank you, man. But it was an awesome SHO that was just always... He had my back.
That's important.
He had my back. So he knew I was fresh. He knew I was there. He had my back from day one. From day one, he had my back.
Saying that, really how were the nurses and the rest of your team? Like, how were they supportive, or did they leave you to your own means? Because I know... you hear these stories where the SHOs, you can't get hold of them, or you can't get hold of senior clinicians and you kind of left there. How was it for you? Because clearly you probably had a lot of support, and it goes a long way. You know what,
we can't sugarcoat it. The truth is it varies depending on where you are and who the person is, and it doesn't matter which hospital it is.
Of course.
It depends. So my SHO was super supportive, but I felt at the time some of my regis weren't. Right, so it depends. It all varied person to person. So some days I would be super supported and be really happy. Others I'd feel like, I've got nothing done. So it would vary, and it's like that across the country. It varies from person to person. And then with the nurses, again, it varies from individuals. There's individuals who have zero skills and they're able to do OBS and those sort of skills, but cannot cannulate, cannot do sort of some other the more advanced nursing skills, I'd say. But I've come across some brilliant nurses, right? And we can bring them onto the show as well. And for example, deteriorating patients, they would have done a full A to E assessment. They'd tell me things like, I've put a cannula in for you, doctor. You tell me what you'd like. Now I've started some oxygen already. I've stabilized them. Their oxygen levels are picking up again. What more do you want me to do? That's brilliant.
It reminds me of some nurses were amazing, and I think nurses probably see junior doctors or fresh doctors more because they're there on the wards. They work super hard. It's like, as doctors, you go and you make a management plan and you prescribe this and that, and when really and truly it's the nurses that go and feed them, clean them, or even HCAs, and give them the medications and measure the OBS on a regular basis. We just go and do it and move on, right? And everyone's got their roles, and the nurses are really good. But it reminded me of my first on-call. With medicine, it's like you're a medical student one day, and the next day you're a doctor, and that's it. You are expected to act and function as a doctor, and it goes a certain way of your F1 will get it, but as any medic, because you're so used to performing and doing really well, regardless, you want to do well, you want to do. And the first on-call, so in general surgery, in our hospital, the junior doctor or the junior F1 covers all the surgical patients. So imagine I have my 30 plus the other 10, 15, 20, and it can easily rack up. And on calls, the way I like to think of it is, it's either really busy, super busy, and you won't even have a time to go to the toilet, you won't even have time to take a breather. And some days it's a bit chilling. It's not too bad, but most often it is busy. And I remember it was my first on call, and you realise that you don't have any other F1 to rely on because you're the only F1 in the hospital covering surgery. And the first hour was fine, just a cannula here and there, you do it. Then at the same time, and in medicine, it always happens, I had 2 deteriorating patients. And you get a call and saying, doctor, I need you to come and review a patient. And it doesn't matter if you've been a doctor for a day or 10 years, you are the doctor. And in that moment in time, that nurse needs you, because those are patients deteriorating. I had till today, man, 2 patients in 2 opposite ends of the hospital, or like 2 opposite ends of the corridor, deteriorating sats. And it's like, doctor, I need you to review this patient. The voice post-op, obviously, sats dropping to 70%. She's on 15 liters oxygen. She's had, anti-blood thinners, anticoagulants, whatever it is you want to call it. But 2 at the same time, And so now, I've never managed this before. It's my first time. If it was 1 patient, it's okay, you can get there, gather your thoughts. But to do 2, and I remember, which was bad, I was running back and forth between the 2. So it would be like, you're taught in like medicine to do an AT, so airways, the breathing, the circulation, and examine them. But I was in airway 1, running to another one, and back and forth. And I remember the nurse, like, sometimes you feel like you're on the verge of tears. You're banging your head against the wall. And like, what do I do? And you don't even know what to do. And I remember this nurse, she was super sweet, super nice. And she's still working at the hospital, so for credit to you. She's like, okay, normally in this situation the doctor does this, they do this and this, and the main thing she taught me was at what moment in time I should escalate to a senior doctor, so essentially my reg or my SHO, the consultant. And she's like, before you do that, make sure you do this. So you basically make sure they're 15 liters of oxygen, make sure they've got a blood's done to measure if they're acutely unwell, if what you call sepsis, which is you can hear about in the news and whatnot, pain relief, whatever. And she kind of, because we get taught how to do it in medical school, do you know what I mean? In essence, it was basically, she's post-op, she had really bad pain that wasn't controlled, and she started to get respiratory distress. She was hyperventilating because she was in super pain, and that kind of affected her, and she wasn't on enough oxygen. It was something really simple. So we're taught how to manage it, but it's real life, and no matter what medical teaches is very good in terms of training, this is truly a job you learn under there. And she calmed me down. And on calls, the first few are awful because you don't know what you're doing, you're still learning things, and it's very different from your day job. And in essence, on call is basically, how would I describe on calls?
So on call, you're the doctor at the end of a telephone for almost every patient in that department. So all of the nurses who are looking after their patients overnight, if anything goes wrong, you're the doctor. So they should be called.
So if something's wrong or they need something, you're basically the doctor. So they call you. And most often it's to do when patients are deteriorating all of a sudden, and then you go and manage them and you sort it out. So that was my first on call. It was awful, and then over time you get a bit better, you understand what you're doing. But even till now, some on calls are just bad, and it's just non-stop, and although it's very rewarding, it's very stressful, it's draining, but it's probably the time when you learn the best medicine. How are your on calls?
Again, almost identical. I think everyone goes through that same sort of experience when you've got loads of deteriorating patients. How do you prioritize? Your mind's a mess because you're thinking, okay, for that person I need to do that, I need to do that, but who will die sooner? And I think you just need to have a level-headed mind and some support, whether it's from a nurse, another doctor, whoever, someone to just organize the thought process and just to do one by one by one. You can only be at one place at a time. You can't be in 2 places at a time. Again, my on-call, my first set of on-call, the way it worked at the Royal London would be we covered certain floors. So we'd either cover a trauma floor, one of the surgical floors, or a large sort of outlier surgical floor. And depending on which level you were, the stress would be different, and it'd be because the nursing levels were different. For example, on the trauma wards, basically they were really advanced, so they were really they wouldn't really reach even a deteriorating stage. Right? They would preemptively with the consultant, because the consultant would be there before the day shift finishes, so he'll wrap everything up, check everything was okay, and they had lower rates of deteriorating patients. So that was the most easiest relatively one, I would say. But again, when I was on call, it was stressful. Again, you've got people septic, infection ravaging through them, on the cusp of death, so you have to sort them out. Then you've got another person who can't breathe anymore, another person with chest pain, another person coughing up blood, and it's just one after the other.
And I remember speaking to a couple of the F1s that started now, obviously having done a year, it's like the on-calls themselves. If each of those patients presented to you, if a nurse called you, let's say an on-call is 4 hours and you had 4 different cases, they're more or less not easy, but you can manage them to a certain degree.
Yeah.
The difficulty is when all 4 of those patients deteriorate at the same time.
And it's you.
And you're dealing with it, and by the time you finish one, someone else has really gotten unwell, and by the time you sort that person out, it's a cycle, and you're always kind of chasing your tail but never getting ahead of it.
Exactly.
And I think some piece of advice is basically don't worry too much about the on-calls. The main thing is, I would say, is there are senior doctors that are there to help you, and make sure. And I had this issue where you think you're Superman and you can go around helping everyone and fixing everyone. We are still new. We haven't seen enough cases to kind of think. And a lot of cases you realize aren't textbook cases.
Exactly.
You don't see these widespread ST waves, these silent MIs, or this patient who looks really well. You can very easily fall into danger very quickly. So know there is senior support, and escalate regardless when you need it.
Ask for help. That's what it is. Essentially, ask for, and I think you can ask for help from anyone. Okay, whether it's a senior nurse, one of the junior nurses, you can ask help from one of the advanced practitioners. Call the consultant if you absolutely have to. Call the regis, call the SHOs. I remember on my first day I had an issue, and I called because my patient had a kidney issue. Normally you would call the renal SHO or the reg. I accidentally called the consultant straight away, and the consultant knew I was new, so she was like, "Oh, you're an F1 and you started today. Okay, fine. Word of advice: you usually go through some of the juniors before you reach me, but it's okay. I'll help you." And she gave me good advice over the phone. But that's what it is. You should, if you ask for help, I don't think anyone will really say to you, "I'm not helping you." They will help you.
Yeah, no one's gonna say no. At the end of the day, we're all in the healthcare field, and we're all there to help our patients and want them to feel better. And regardless of what role you play, be it a nurse, be it a pharmacist, just so many times I was confused with doses, and I was like, pharmacists help me, nurses, ward clerks, we all have the same goal, which is very good in the healthcare industry. So you know what your end goal is, and you can work towards that.
And the number one best piece of advice that I was given before walking in on my first day as a doctor, and I still would advise it to everyone, is you have to be friendly and make friends with everyone. What you find is that when you're just a nice person to everyone, to the nurses, to the porters, to the cleaners, to the HCAs, you start to work for each other. Other people don't like you. People are obstructive, and what you'll find is, for example, you need a chest x-ray immediately. The radiographer has approved it, but you're also friends with the porter. The porters do your jobs quickly. So what you find is that being a friendly face, approachable, someone who's helpful, it's a human innate thing that you're more likely to work for someone because you like them.
It's naturally, and
it's natural,
and there's no reason for you to be rude to anyone. And it does go the extra bit when you're needing help. If you're nice and friendly with people, it's the sad reality of it all, but it does help. So we've kind of talked about the first few days, first week or so, our on-calls, which were awful. Sometimes even now it's awful. There are good moments, and I think we can talk about different aspects. But how was it, one day being a medical student and then all of a sudden being a doctor? How was that? Because that transition for me was mad.
The transition, it was overwhelming, man. Like, I was on the brink of tears some day, because I'd be coming home late. I'd like just doing all of these jobs, looking after so many sick people. You have that, is it imposter syndrome? Is it imposter syndrome where you're like,
you feel like you're doing something you're not really supposed to be?
Am I really a doctor? I had imposter syndrome. So I was like, and I remember going to my wife and saying, I don't feel like I'm an actual real doctor. Don't feel like I've got the skills. I can't even cannulate these vascular patients. And she was very supportive as well. But I remember feeling overwhelmed. I remember feeling like I'm an imposter. I'm not really a doctor. But again, it's one of those things with experience, with time, you get there. So on my first few days, I have to admit, it was absolute hell. I didn't know where the departments were, I didn't know where things were, I didn't know how to book things.
Did you think you're getting lost? I just go around in circles.
That's what I mean. And imagine, like, my consultant, so medical school will teach you very well about your CT heads, your CT chest, abdo-pelvis, CT angios.
Yeah.
Now those things are like you didn't really learn a lot about them, CT angios and all of those things, and why you need them, explaining it to the radiologist about what you're planning to do. I struggled a lot with that. So the transition points, I think in general, in transition points I do struggle. So from
you mentioned earlier.
from preclinical to clinical, and then from clinical to F1, I found a little bit of that I struggled a little bit. But I think with time you pick up pace, and with good mentors, with good teachers, with good consultants, those guys really pick you up, give you the confidence, and sort of that imposter syndrome begins to fade away. I had imposter syndrome, I'd say, for a good while. Good while.
For me, the main thing was, like, I don't know if you guys, I'm sure we mentioned it, it's like, in med school, I used to wake up, if I didn't feel like going in, I didn't go in,
and you wouldn't tell me, so I'd turn up.
So I'd make Amz wait, and then I wouldn't just rock up, or if I had to do something, I'd leave early. But now I realised, not now, I think at that time, it's, you finally have responsibilities, you are expected to be there, you're expected to do everything, and you don't have the luxury like you did as a student, where
people are thinking, how's this a revelation?
No, but you have to remember, as medics or medical students, you're a student for so long, you don't really understand the full extent of what it works. Regardless of being a doctor, it's vocational, and it's like, okay, I'm a doctor, and you kind of forget that it's a job. It is a job still at the end of the day, and you're expected to be there. You're paid for a time as well, do you know what I mean? So it hit me like, I need to be in work every single day, really early, prepping the notes, and I can't leave. Like, you know them ones, if I'm tired, I have to like get through the day, then go home and sleep. It's not them ones I can go home for a nap, I can go home and do this, I can see my mates. It's,
you have to go to bed early as well.
And you have to, I've never but then you're like, I need to go sleep because I need to get minimum 8 hours, and when you're in surgery, you start super early, and then you start even more earlier because when you're prepping the notes. And it's important, like my reg and my consultant were very good. They worked me hard, but they taught me very good. Like they taught me, like they were super smart, so they taught me a lot of like clinical medicine, but they taught me documentation, how things were done. They disciplined me, and like my consultant would like things done in a certain way, certain things documented, and he's the type of guy that would say, what's the potassium on this person, what's the fluid intake, outtake, urine output, and these are things that I saw other F1s not really care about, but for me, even till now, I document things in a certain way that he taught me, and he was very particular. And at the time, you're thinking, he's got us so lucky, or he's doing it in such a way. Why am I writing twice as much as them? And then you learn and you pick up good things. So it pays to be with a very good consultant, a very good reg or SHO, because you learn the good and you carry it forward. And especially and I remember he said to me, the first few months of F1 are very crucial because that's where you form your habits, and you want to form good habits. And you'll carry that moving forward. Because I could have easily not recorded the basic observations, not recorded the blood test from yesterday, not recorded the urine output or whatever it was, and basically continue that. And once you form a habit, it's very difficult to change it. And even now on Obs and Gynae, I may not necessarily need the urine output, I may not necessarily need fluid intake, outtake, chocks or whatnot, but it's a good habit to have it, and it's something I hope to continue for the rest of medicine. But in terms of the transition from a medical student to an F1, is you start getting paid, which is good.
You get paid something.
It's good because then you have like a lump sum, and because you're so busy the first few months, you just work for the day, and you see like this lump sum at the end of your month at the back. And the beauty about medicine is sometimes you know how you feel like imposter. Sometimes I felt I was like I didn't deserve the money I made because it didn't feel like working. For people that work in retail, like when I was working in retail, I used to watch the clock. I used to be like, okay, every hour I'm earning.
You're right.
Like this day I'll get 50 quid or whatever it was. But in medicine, it's just a whole blur. And then sometimes you think about, it's a job, but I think that's the beauty of it. It doesn't feel like you're working. It feels like being a doctor was normal. It was natural for me to do this. It was natural. It was you. So I don't see it as a job. I see it as being a doctor was normal. I was born for this. Do you know what I mean? I don't know if it makes sense when I'm saying it. And then at the end of the month, you get money. I think as you get older and your priorities change, your responsibilities, you're a bit more conscious. But initially, first, even now though, it doesn't feel like a job. You're not watching clock. You're not thinking, I got 2 hours to lunch or 2 hours to go work, or do you know what I mean? It's like a blur.
And I'll tell you what it is.
And they get paid.
Because it's intellectually really stimulating. You're really using your skills, and it takes you away from looking at the clock and just waiting and biding your time, because you're busy doing something. You're busy trying to figure out puzzles and solving those things.
Some days you do watch the clock, you're like, I can't wait to go home.
Obviously.
But I read the book, basically they were saying, in terms of a career, the best career needs to have 3 things, right? So it's autonomy. So essentially, you being able to make decisions by yourself, you not having to do something in terms of rule books and like you do this, you do this, you do this, you do this, and there's no room for improvement, there's no room for making your own decision. So being a doctor gives you autonomy. You get to manage patients to a certain degree by yourself, which gets better and better as you get more senior. You need to have stimulation from your job, so it mentally stimulates you, which you get in medicine obviously, because you're problem solving, critical analysis. It's there from day one. It's there from medical school. And the third one is financial rewards and gains. Although financially you do earn more than the average person in the country, and you may not earn as much as a banker or a lawyer, you do earn enough so you're not worried about money. And this is a whole debate, and we can talk about it. Is I personally feel that the amount of work you put in or the level of work you're doing isn't proportional or relative to the amount of money you earn. But at the same time, I am conscious and aware that the money you do earn is more than the average, and it is a good income. So it depends on how you see it. If you're someone that wants to be rewarded for the work you do, then maybe you fall short. But if you're someone that, regardless of work you do, it's about a monetary sum, then it is a good paying job to a certain degree. So those are the 3 things. It doesn't need to be medicine. There's so many other jobs that have it. So autonomy, being able to make your own decisions. Having stimulation, so being mentally stimulated, so not doing the same thing, repetitive work. And thirdly, financial rewards and gains. And those are the 3 things. If you have it, very few jobs in the world have it. Medicine hits 2, maybe 3 of those. It's what makes you content in terms of career point of view, which is why, although you hear doctors moving, leaving countries, a lot of them stick it out, because you can have 2 months of crappy days, but there'll be that one day, that 1 hour, that one patient that is like, yo, do you know what? It's amazing, and you continue doing it. So medicine has this grasp on you.
That's what it is, though, isn't it? It's that one case. You can have lots of really stressful cases, but that one case where the patient is stabilized and you're proud because you've stabilized them, or they survive and walk out of hospital. But before they walk out, they give you a card or some chocolate.
They give you a hug, a thank you,
or even they say, "Thank you, doctor. You've saved my life," or "I'm so grateful to you." The satisfaction from that, money can't buy. Money cannot buy a thank you. Remember that. Money cannot buy that thank you.
So that is what keeps you going. And I used to explain to people, like, being on call is being like a boxer. It's like being punched in the face repeatedly for 12 hours, for 12 rounds. But like a boxer, you fall down and you get back up, and you're happy to go into work the next day to get punched up again. So being on call is basically being punched in the face repeatedly, multiple times. But you go home, you recover, and you're ready for the next bout, next ring, next match, whatever. Not one day, I'm going to get Anthony Joshua on here as a guest. I'm saying it now.
No, we will get Anthony Joshua.
We're going to get Anthony Joshua here as a guest, and we can compare being a doctor, being a boxer. But wouldn't you agree? It's like you're getting punched up, and you're getting knocked down, but for some weird reason, and it is a weird reason, you're happy to do it all over again.
You're happy to do it again and again and again. That's what it is.
So it'll be interesting when we get guests on other medics and other doctors from different specialties, see how they take it. So I think that kind of covers the first month or the first few weeks of being on call.
Yeah, that's the first few weeks.
Is there anything you want to add before we kind of wrap it up?
No, not at all, really. There's not much to say, really, apart from anyone that's, I guess.
So we give 3 pieces of advice we haven't done. What 3 tips would you give for all the new F1s that are starting? I know this video is a bit early, but we can repost it, I guess, at a later time.
I would say don't worry if you're slow at first. Don't worry if you're slow getting out. Don't worry if you're slow getting the jobs done. When you're new into the system, it's natural for you to take that extra minute, and you'll eventually pick up pace, and you'll eventually join the rest of the guys who are climbing the ladder. Number 2, you do have support around you. You do. You just have to reach out. You have to ask. You have to be willing to ask. It takes humility. Do you know that? To ask. Being a doctor, right? Sometimes you can become overwhelmed and become a little bit arrogant and have some pride in you, right? Because you're so qualified, you've got all this knowledge, you're a healer and all sorts of things, right? It takes real humility to say, I don't know, I need help, right? And I need to make a call. And it takes humility to ask, for example, a nurse, a HCA, what do you think, right? Or what should I do? That takes humility. Have that humility. And the next thing is just be nice to everyone. Be nice to everyone. When you're an F2, be nice to everyone. When you're a reg, when you're a CT, when you're a consultant, just be nice, because it just makes the job so much more nicer. I loved some of my jobs purely because the team that I was in was just a really happy, cooperative team. That's it. From doctors to nurses to everyone. And I loved it. That's it. What about you?
I agree with all three of those 100%. A few more I would add is it's a steep learning curve. You will learn a lot from day one of medicine to the day you retire, to be fair.
Yeah, true.
Because no two cases will be the same. You'll be seeing so many different patients, so many different presentations of the same cases. Someone may be having an asthma attack, but they may have been having it in two different ways. Like Am said, it's very easy to get overwhelmed. So I would say there's no harm in taking a minute, taking a step back, catching your breath, clearing your head, this whole thing about mindfulness, that's reevaluating the situation, kind of making a list of whatever it is you do and kind of tackling the problem head on from there. But take a break and look after yourself as an F1. It's very easy to kind of skip lunch, skip dinner, skip going to the toilet, skip loads of these things. Look after yourself, because if you don't look after yourself, you can't look after your patients.
Exactly.
And I know it's busy, and you'll learn that.
And there's always time for food to go to the toilet. There's always time.
There is time.
There's always time.
And you do have support, so ask for it. And obviously, I don't want to repeat what you said. The final thing I'll say is enjoy the process. And I always say about this, enjoy being an F1, because you will only be an F1 once in your life. You'll only be an SHO once in your life. Enjoy the process, embrace it. And, there will be days that are hard. There will be days when you're kicking yourself in the head. There will be days when you're on the verge of tears, and there will be days where you don't feel like going into work. But stick it out, go through it, embrace the journey, and then you look back. Even as a SHO, although we've been doctors for like a year, you look back and you're like, oh, do you know what? I learned so much. I remember doing this. And, look after yourself. There's help available, and enjoy it. You've worked so hard for many years, and it's not just med school. You worked hard during your GCSEs, your A-levels. You finally got into med school. You graduated, and you're a doctor, and you deserve it. Enjoy it, and whoever watches the episodes, we wish you the best of luck.
Yeah.
And you are a doctor, so go out and save some lives.
That's about it, really. Yeah. Simple as save lives.
Go and save some lives. But thank you once again for listening to this episode of our podcast. I've kind of enjoyed talking about it.
Definitely.
Next week we'll talk about more specifically what jobs we did and what it kind of entailed, and the difference in doing the same job or the same specialty in a London hospital and a non-London hospital. And we can talk about some cases we saw. We'll take it from there. But in the meantime, make sure you like, make sure you comment, make sure you subscribe. There's a button there.
Yep.
Tell your friends and family about it. But we look forward, and we'll see you next week.